never talk to my dad. I sent my dad a text to ask if he wanted to go on a road trip. I really want a girlfriend. What do I got to do with you cheating on your boyfriend? Yes, I bring in cameras, and yes, that's my way. I'm paying for a home that I wouldn't be fully accepted in. That's how much I love my family.
You know, just because you're LGBT, that does not mean that you can't respect your parents. What's up, everybody? Ty Rivera here, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world. Before we go any further, I'm just going to ask that you like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to leave a comment just to help me on the algorithm, but you don't know what to comment, just leave a knife, because Jerrod Carmichael himself is probably going to come for my neck. All right, guys, I told you guys I was going to keep watching the Jerrod Carmichael reality show, and I am continuing to watch it. But this one, it really is more about the way that we as LGBT treat our parents and the way that we expect them to bend their rules or do things a different way just because we're gay and that makes us special. Also, I think a lot of times as LGBT people, we forget how many years it took for us to be comfortable with ourselves and to get to a point where we were willing to be honest and willing to come out. And then when we come out to our parents, suddenly we expect them to just take it in and accept it like that. And you're not always going to get that, especially if your parents are from a generation like my parents or Jerrod's parents. Jerrod's parents and my parents aren't that far apart in age. And then the other thing that happens with the adult children is that I think a lot of times we forget that our parents, in a lot of cases, were at ages when they had us and when they were raising us that we now wouldn't be ready to even have kids and raise kids. It's just that growing up in those generations, that's what they were supposed to do. So that's what they did, was they had families, they got married, they raised kids. And we don't think about that because from Gen X and on, we really have had a lot more time to think about our feelings. The study of psychology has evolved. The way that society looks at things has evolved. And so our parents, especially depending on where they grew up, didn't have the same luxuries that we have and weren't able to just sit and think about their feelings or the way that they want to process things. It was about have kids, be married, buy a house, get a car, take care of your kids, raise your kids, take care of your wife. A lot of us come from single income households. My dad was sole breadwinner and my mom was a housewife. And that's similar to what Jerrod is dealing with. And so I don't really like this episode because another creator that I can't remember the name of, but I'll put a link to her video down below in the description box because I saw her video after I made mine and I thought she had a very interesting perspective and I really did like her video. But one of the things that she said that struck me was that his reality show feels more like an exploration of power than truth, which is something that I definitely do agree with. And I hadn't said it in those exact words, but it really does sum up the way that I feel about his reality show. I feel like he's putting all the people around him in these uncomfortable positions as a power trip and as a way to show that because he's the one with the money, he will basically carrot on a stick these people, his family, his friends, his boyfriend, into doing whatever it is he wants because he knows that he holds the power. So in this episode that I'm watching now, which is episode 4, he asked his dad to go on a road trip with him.
I sent my dad a text to ask if he wanted to go on a road trip to his hometown of Dillon, South Carolina. And he responded, not really.
To his father's hometown of Dillon, South Carolina, because he supposedly wants to spend time with him. But as the trip progresses, you realize that he's just basically trying to humiliate his dad and put him in these uncomfortable positions for no other reason than just a power trip. And he disguises it as he wants to hash out some things with his dad about why he feels the way he feels and why he grew up the way he grew up. And he's trying to pin on his dad that he cheats on his boyfriend because his father cheated on his mother for 35 years, he says.
My father cheated on my mom for at least 35 years.
And maybe I'm too old school in that way, but I think that that should be between your mom and dad. And I feel like if you want to have that conversation with your parents, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I don't think that's the kind of thing that you should bring cameras in for. And he discusses that in his comedy. And I know for some people, when it comes to stand up, nothing is off limits. And for me, I'm a lot that way too. But I definitely do think about my family, and I definitely do think about what's going to embarrass them and what's going to make them feel particular ways. And I think that as a stand-up, you kind of do have to think about that. If you're talking about society or people in general, I don't think there should be any limits on that. But when you're talking about your family and people that you really do supposedly love and supposedly care about, but you can't give them enough grace to be like, okay, there might be dynamics in your relationship that I wasn't able to see as a child growing up in it. And maybe if I want to ask about that, I should ask in private. But instead, he says that the cameras are because he can't do it without the cameras because otherwise he doesn't feel brave enough. Well, that's your fault for being a bitch, really, Jerrod. Don't try to make it seem like this is you being brave because you're willing to have the conversation with cameras there. Oh, when you're able to monetize it, then you want to have this very important family conversation with your dad. But if cameras aren't around, then suddenly you lose your balls? Is that the way it works? Because that doesn't make sense. And there are several ways that Jerrod is still trying to push this gay is edgy type of thing with his family. And maybe that's because his family and his parents being as conservative as they are, maybe for them it still is shocking. And that's the reason you keep trying to push it on them in that way, because you know it's not shocking for anybody else. So why don't you go bully your parents into taking in your ideas and understanding that you are the boss and you are going to be the boss from here on out? Because otherwise, I don't see a point to everything that he does when he's dealing with his family. At a point, he asks his dad, because him and his dad are in a Winnebago or an RV together, and they're taking this road trip. And he, at a point, asks his dad if his dad wants to meet his boyfriend. And his dad says, sure, I'll meet him. And then he's like, but do you want to meet him?
Do you want to meet my boyfriend?
You feel like I don't want to meet him because you feel like...
Well, I'm asking, would you?
Yeah, I will meet him. I'm not going to say I would.
Well, do you want to?
I'll meet him. Why you get quiet when I say I meet him?
Oh, I mean, you know, I don't think you really... I don't know if you have like a real... I think you would do it. I don't think you necessarily want to.
Well, what do you want? For him to be jumping for joy because he wants to meet your boyfriend? Because I know my parents are more on the conservative side. And take my sisters, for example. They're all straight. When they ask my parents if they want to meet one of their boyfriends, they're apprehensive about it. And depending on how conservative your parents are, and I don't mean in voting, I mean in lifestyle, the way that they live, the way that they were raised, their views on relationships, their views on when you should actually meet a partner. But the way that I was raised is you're not really even supposed to introduce anybody to your parents unless you have an intention with them. When you're young and you're going out and dating people and that kind of stuff in your junior high, high school, yeah, sure, they can meet a boyfriend or girlfriend here or there. But once you get to a particular age, you don't just take everybody home. And I'm not saying everybody's like this, but I'm saying from watching this particular show, Jerrod's parents appear to be closer to what my parents are than a lot of the more liberal parents that would just be like, yeah, sure, bring them by, bring anybody by. Unless you have an intention of being married with somebody or it's going that way, my parents in particular do not want to meet any of your partners. So when he's getting annoyed with his dad because his dad isn't just jumping for joy to meet his boyfriend, it seems like it's just an excuse for Jerrod to act out towards his father, because it's another thing that he can use against him and basically leverage as some sort of emotional blackmail in order to build this case of you owe me because you haven't been exactly what I want you to be. So then he's like, do you want to see a picture of him? And so his dad's like, yeah, sure, I'll see a picture of him. And then Jerrod shows him a picture and he's like, this is him straight out the shower. And it's his boyfriend wearing underwear in a selfie. And I don't know about you guys, but even if I were straight, I would not show my dad a picture of my girlfriend in her underwear straight out of the shower. And what's your dad supposed to do when you show him that? Be like, oh, he's hot. How many inches? Top, bottom, reverse? What's going on, girl? girl. Give me the tea. I can't wait to hear about your man. What do you think your relationship with your father is supposed to be? He's your father. He's not one of your gay girlfriends. And so there's a point where there's a guy helping him because Jerrod didn't know how to drive the RV. And so he ended up scraping against one of the poles at the gas station. And this guy helped him figure it out, like getting it so it wasn't stuck. And when the guy is done helping him, he looks at his dad and he was like,
Dude that helped us was kind of cute.
and then he starts explaining to his dad about daddies, twinks, otters, which are all like body types within the gay community.
He was kind of a daddy. That's what we call like an attractive older man in the gay community. Daddies. You could be a daddy.
Explain that again.
Bears are like big guys, a lot of times hairy. Then you got your otters. The twink is like a dolphin. Then you got your twunks.
It's stuff that your dad really doesn't need to know, and I don't really have a problem with that. But again, it just goes to show that Jerrod is trying to make gay seem like this edgy thing with his parents. And it's like, if you want your parents to act chill about it, why don't you act chill about it? And I really do just bring all this up because I think that this reality show really could serve as a manual for other LGBT people of what not to do, of how not to behave as especially a freshly out LGBT person. Because Jerrod, like I said, is a gay man. He shows a montage where he's lying to the audience, acting like he's straight.
I know every girl in this room I would have sex with because I've tendered you in my mind. I like you. You have great skin. Really nice skin.
And he really wants a girlfriend.
I really want a girlfriend.
And at a point during one of his special recordings, he's flirting with the girl that's in the audience.
I see you got nice hair, and I'm very interested in what you're doing after the show.
And so it's like you were lying to yourself for so long, and now you're finally comfortable with yourself, or that's your claim, but I don't think you behave like a person that is in fact comfortable with themselves. But now you're supposedly comfortable with yourself, and you want your parents to just jump on board with it. So then there's another part where he's looking for food and he wants to eat at a Bojangles, and he's being really insufferable with his dad. His dad is driving. His dad was a truck driver for years. He has a joke about his dad walking with a hunch, and he's like,
He walks with a hunch now. Nothing's wrong with him. It's just like the weight of his sins.
yeah, that's a decent joke that you could make about almost anybody that walks with a hunch. But your dad was a truck driver for how many years? And you can't understand why maybe he has a hunch. Maybe it was because he was breaking his back working. And so he has his dad driving from one Bojangles to another because of their rating and because they didn't get something right. And it's just like, it's Bojangles. You're going to a fast food chain. Who is checking out the ratings on a fast food chain? What are you so worried about? It's not like you're the president. It would affect absolutely nothing in the world if you were to literally croak from your food. But that's probably not what's going to happen. In the worst case scenario, you're going to get diarrhea, and then you're not going to be able to grill your dad the way you want to, or you're not going to be able to get fucked in the hotel room on Grindr while you're cheating on your boyfriend, which is a lot of what he's trying to do by pressing his dad about his dad's affair. Is he's trying to dismiss his bad behavior because at a point he talks about it on stage where he's like,
I said to my dad, I was like, learn from your parents how to love. And taught me some pretty conflicting things. And he said to me, what do I got to do with you cheating on your boyfriend?
mic drop, because you keep cheating on your boyfriend repeatedly and you're just trying to blame it on your dad. But at 35 years old, there comes a time where you're responsible for your behavior. You can't just keep blaming your parents. If you've got to go to therapy, which you're already going to therapy, and you're not necessarily being honest with your therapist, you showed video of that on one of the last episodes where you lied to your therapist about feeling monogamous and that you weren't cheating and you had just been cheating and then you cheated right after. So really, I just think Jerrod has a lot of mental problems. And I think one of the things that's going on here is Jerrod knows that he's not an entertaining enough personality to have a reality show or even to be in front of the camera. Jerrod is a behind the scenes guy that can't accept that and really wants to be on-air talent, but that's just not what he is. That's not what his personality dictates. That's not what his stand-up dictates. Really, Jerrod could be fully behind the scenes and nobody would ever miss him. He could completely disappear from public life and nobody would ever ask, where's Jerrod Carmichael? Nobody cares. You're not that interesting. That's why you keep having to humiliate friends and family members in order to record this reality show, because you on your own aren't enough. So then we get to the part at dinner where he's at dinner with his dad, and his dad says that he hadn't called for a while, and his dad and his mom were wondering if they had done something wrong. And Jerrod says, when I came out,
You said I was probably going through a phase and told me not to bring a guy home. And Mom basically said I was going to hell and she couldn't go against Jesus.
well, one of those statements is true. But when it comes to the phase thing, my parents still think me being gay is a phase. Every once in a while, my mom expresses that. I think my dad may be over that, believing it was a phase. But in the beginning, they definitely did. And what do I care? My parents are like 74 and 84 years old. If they want to die thinking that me being gay is a phase, I'm 100% fine with that, because at least they had hope. And who am I, as bad as I've been? Because, I sometimes think about my parents and the way that I behaved with them when I was a kid. And of course I was a kid and they weren't perfect and they had their own problems. But I really do think about my behavior when I was a kid. And a lot of times I cringe when I think about how terrible I was to both of them. And it's not something that I beat myself up about, but there are definitely times where I'm like, yeah, I really was not good to them. And there were times where they were trying and I just was not understanding because I was a kid, and that's a part of growing up, and it's a necessary part of growing up. But I do think that at some point in your life you do have to make peace with that. And I'm not talking about people that have been through situations where they've suffered different types of abuse or there's been true mistreatment. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm just talking about when your parents haven't been perfect or even close to perfect. Even Jerrod's father cheating on his mother for 35 years. I get that Jerrod felt a particular way about that, but at the same time, you have to accept that your dad never left your family. So even though he may have been cheating and not being an upstanding guy, there could have been issues going on between him and your mother that you couldn't understand as a child, and that even to this day, he might not feel comfortable talking to you about. Jerrod talks about how religious his mother is all the time. Sometimes when people are raised really religious, they're not the most comfortable with sex. Sometimes they look at sex as being only for procreation, and outside of that, they're not going to be the most adventurous. And I'm not saying that's a legitimate reason for somebody to cheat, but I'm saying that that's the reason some people do cheat. And so if he has some little hussy across town that's doing stuff that his wife won't do, and things that maybe even in some cases because of the way he was raised, he doesn't think is right to do with your wife. I've met guys like that in my life. And again, that's a very dysfunctional way to be, but only in recent times have we really started to examine the way that we feel about things and the things that make us tick in those ways, or in some cases act out, and then we can work on that and make sure that we're ready to be in relationships by the time that we get into them. In generations past, they haven't always had that luxury. So to me, expecting that from your family is not fair. So when he tells his dad about how he felt rejected because of that, his dad says in so many words,
Well, you know what? Let me say this then. I'm not ashamed to say it. Is that how you received it? I would apologize right here, right now.
that he apologizes. And then he says,
I remember me telling you that you're my son. And that I love you. I'm going to love you regardless.
you're my son and I'm going to love you regardless, which is huge for a man from that generation, because usually they bottle up their feelings and they don't want to say things like that. And getting them to apologize can be one of the toughest things ever. But if you get your parents to actually do that, especially your father, because men from those generations just weren't built like that. So for him to actually say that was huge. And so then Jerrod is still being a brat and can't accept that his dad is saying he's sorry that they made him feel that way. And that right there should be enough to tell you that, okay, we can kind of move forward and figure out where we're going to go from here. And instead, he's like,
Me not being able to bring someone I love home is you turning against me.
and then he is like, with all due respect,
What makes it even more insulting, respectfully, is a house that I'm paying for. I'm paying for a home that I wouldn't be fully accepted it. That's how much I love my family.
And I took a screenshot of his dad's face when he said that, because to me, that is the look of a broken man, a man that you have now shamed publicly. Because even if you're paying for your parents' house, that is not the kind of thing that you should say in front of cameras. And why is it you're paying for their house anyway? Are you paying for their house out of the goodness of your heart? Or are you paying for their house so that you'll have leverage over them and so you can hold it over their heads and shame them when they don't do exactly what it is you want and remind them that you're paying for their house? Because I don't know how anybody else was raised, but I was raised that if you do something out of the goodness of your heart, then you don't bring it up. You don't throw it in people's faces. And I know that my dad, if I ever told him something like that, when I get to the point where I am able to pay for his house, if I ever told him like that, I know he'd probably be chill about it or be like kind of whatever. But my mom is the spicy one. And as soon as she heard that, she would tell me, you know what? Don't bother paying for the house. Me and your dad got it. You can take your money and you can shove it up your ass. That would be a direct quote of something that my mother would say. Also, when it comes to paying for your parents' place when you're an adult, first off, let me say, I think it's a great thing and I think it's very generous of a person when they do pay for their parents' home. But Jerrod has been successful for, I think, the last 10 years is how long he's been successful. So let's say he's been paying for his parents' house for the last 10 years. For at least 20 years, his parents were paying for him to live under that roof. So he hasn't even gotten even with them as far as I would guess on the math. And then when you consider food and everything it takes to raise a child. Also, like I told you guys, I knew Jerrod when he was in Hollywood. I knew him when we both lived in Hollywood. And I would see him all the time. He never had a job in Hollywood. So who was paying for you to live in Hollywood? And he wasn't living an extravagant lifestyle. He lived on a friend's couch is where he lived. Lisa Fernandez was her name. And she used to be a producer for Univision. And she had an apartment and she let him and a couple of the other guys stay on the couch, stay in the living room. No shady stuff. She wasn't trying to hook up with them. She wasn't that kind of lady. She was very nice. She was very cool. She just was very generous, had a soft heart, and was trying to do stand-up herself at that point. So she let some of the younger comics live with her. And Jerrod was one of them. But I never remember him having a job, and he seemed to be getting food money from somewhere. I know Lisa wasn't paying for everything. So maybe your parents gave you some seed money that grew you into what you turned into. So you paying for their house is really just a return on their investment if you look at it that way, unless you're just trying to be bratty and say you want somebody to owe you, which is what it really does feel like. So then his dad tells him, love in time heals things.
Love in time heals things.
So when his dad tells him love in time heals things, you can tell that that's still not good enough for him. And I really feel like it's because Jerrod is just being a brat and wants it to be because he pays for his parents' house, that they are just under his thumb now. He makes the rules and they will do things on his time. That's really what seems to be happening as far as I can see. So then they finally make it to a hotel room to spend the night in the middle of this trip, which I don't really know how long this trip is, but I don't feel like it should be that long. They're going North Carolina, South Carolina. But anyway, this is TV, so you got to really extend it out and make it seem like it's a longer trip than it is. So they spend the night at a hotel. He immediately goes to his room and gets on Grindr and starts cheating on his boyfriend. And then we're on to the next day. So then when he's back in the hotel the next morning, he asks his boyfriend,
What am I supposed to do with him today?
Get him talking.
and the boyfriend says, get him talking. Which I'm going to tell you guys, as an ethnic person, never ask a white person how to deal with your parents. Because the way you deal with your parents when you're black or Latino is going to be way different from the way that white kids deal with their parents. I know not every white kid, so don't come after me, white people. But in a lot of cases, white people, you call your parents by your first names. Which I know is kind of a stereotype, but it's true. In a lot of cases, you guys do have much different relationships with your parents. So when a person of color asks their white partner how to deal with their parents, that's 9 out of 10 going to be bad advice. So there's a point when him and his dad are talking by the fire and he starts asking his dad really personal questions about whether or not he loved his mistress because he had 4 kids with her and he basically lived a double life, which I agree is a terrible thing. But again, I think that's more between his dad and his mom than him and his dad. But if you want to ask that, go ahead and ask it. But to be asking it on camera, and so his dad tells him,
I got feelings too. We way that you don't want to be heard, I don't want to be heard.
And he's like, I don't really want this out there. Is this going to be on your special? Meaning, is it going to be on the show? And Jerrod says,
Maybe, probably, yeah, I don't know.
This has to be discussed on cameras.
and his dad says, I don't really want that out there. I don't really want this made public. And then Jerrod is like,
You made it public. You had
No, I didn't make it public.
you had children outside of your marriage is the most public thing you can do. It's like that I want to make clear. I'm not making it public. You made it public.
which again, I do not agree with. That's not him making it public. And then Jerrod says that apparently the kids and him went to the same school and he wants to meet his brothers, and so everybody knew but him. And again, I can understand you having feelings that way, but I think that should be handled privately between you and your dad, and not you and your dad and some cameras. And his dad, of course, is feeling ambushed and makes that clear too, because he's like, I thought I was going to have a bonding trip with you. I didn't know we were going to talk about my past. I don't really want to talk about the past. The past is the past. And again, that's where my dad is very similar in the way that my dad would tell me something like that if I were to be asking him about some old stuff. He'd just be like, yeah, I'm not trying to talk about that. And I'm especially not talking about that in front of cameras. But again, I think Jerrod is playing the blackmail card and just being like, I pay for your house. I pay for you guys to live. I pay for you guys to have a comfortable living. So the least you can do is let me make all of this public. And I think that's an abuse of any power that Jerrod actually has. And I don't think that this makes him look good. I do not think that this entire reality show makes him look good. And I think that his people, if he had people working for him that really cared about him, would stop him from doing this. I think they would have gotten in the way and just been like, look, don't do this to your family. Your family is more important than some reality show. I get it. You're grasping at relevance. I get it. Not a lot of people care about your life, but this isn't the way to get the attention that you want, Jerrod. So the way this episode actually ends is he goes on this speech with his dad where he's like,
I'm being a man. I'm stepping up. I'm actually saying the things.
and it's like, you're really not being a man, because he's claiming that he's being a man because he has the conversation and he's like, if these cameras help me, then they help me, and that's what I need. If that's the way I need to do it.
If the cameras help me, then they fucking help.
And it's like, if you're a man, you would be able to have this conversation in private. You wouldn't need a camera crew there for you to have this conversation with your dad. And yeah, maybe he wouldn't want to talk about it at first, but maybe if you would actually show some patience, eventually you'd get the conversation that you actually wanted in the most genuine way. Cornering a person is never going to be the way to do it. And making a person feel like they're being ambushed is not going to get the most genuine or authentic response from them. And trying to do it solely on your time and because you say now he should want to talk about it, maybe he's not ready to talk about it. And why does he owe you that anyway? Yeah, maybe you feel a particular way, but not everybody else is responsible for your feelings, just like you're not responsible for anybody's feelings on you being gay. So maybe this is more about you and a power trip than it is about trying to have any kind of relationship with your father. And I think if you had people around you that really cared about you, including your boyfriend, including the people that you co-created that show with, Ari Kacher, who I remember. Hello, Ari. Shout out, Ari, if you're watching. But I think you should have talked to Jerrod too and been like, hey, this isn't a good way to handle your relationship with your father. Maybe it'll make for a good scene in a reality show, but isn't your relationship with your father more important than a scene on a reality show? And you guys can let me know down below in the comments, but there is a part of me that feels like once you get to a certain age, if you've had a reasonably good relationship with your parents and you feel like they've tried their best, at least where you're concerned, never mind their relationship with your mother, again, barring any kind of physical mistreatment, anything like that, but just as far as their marriage is their marriage and your relationship with them is your relationship with them, respectively, your mother and your father, I think there does come a point when they start getting to those up there years where it's kind of your responsibility as their adult child to let them know that everything's forgiven. Let them die with a clear conscience when it comes to you. Because as human beings, we're all going to have things that are going to live on our conscience for the rest of our lives. Things that we should have done, things that we should have said, things where we should have been more giving, things where we should have been more caring. But I really do feel like when it comes to our parents, there should come a point where you're like, look, We both know what our relationship has been, and I completely forgive you. If you feel like you have anything you want to talk to me about, I'm open to hearing it. But as far as me needing an apology from you, as far as me needing a confession from you, you owe me nothing. And I think that if you really look at your relationship with your parents, even if you didn't understand why they did certain things, they were usually trying their best with you. But again, we forget about their trauma, and we completely forget that the older your parents are, the more they dealt with actual trauma. Where maybe in my generation we got spankings, my parents' generations got beatings. And I know that for a fact because both of my parents have talked to me about the way that they were disciplined when they were kids. So you think there's not a lot going on there? Then whatever infidelity that they saw when they were growing up and not ever having the benefit of therapy or anybody even thinking about therapy, especially again, if you're in an ethnic family. Because when it comes to Black and Mexican, it's hard to get them to go to the regular doctor, let alone a psychiatrist or a therapist. Most people of color are just starting to get to that point because for a long time, all that stuff was seen as family business, and you don't talk to people outside of the family about family business. So maybe your parents didn't have the benefit or the privilege of taking the time to figure out what was messing them up. They just had to navigate life however they navigated it. And yeah, it may not have been perfect, but if you think about it, are you perfect? So I guess what I'm getting at is I really do feel like Jerrod is completely destroying his relationship with his family and friends to make this reality show. And in the end, I do hope everybody does forgive him, because yeah, I get mad in the moment when I'm watching this because I think he's just mishandling everything and a terrible example of what a gay person should be. But at the same time, I don't wish ill will on him. And I do hope somewhere in all this he finds what he's looking for and learns to maybe be a little bit more forgiving and a little more understanding and respect that the people in his life shouldn't have to participate in a reality show and humiliate themselves to show him any kind of loyalty. Anyway, let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. This has been Ty Rivera, the absolute best LGBTQ comedian in the world.
Can I go home?